were plotting against his father, who would fight to the last bullet. This is the London School of Economics, the LSE. Saif studied here, his charity has given it money. But academics who knew and liked him are now appalled by his speech in support of a brutal regime.
Here was a man, I think, under huge stress and personal circumstances, now torn apart by this tension between, on the one hand, loyalty to his father and family, and on the other hand, the reform of his country. This was almost a tragedy of Shakespearean proportions being played out in front of us. And when he came to make his final judgment, he made the wrong one.
This is the library at LSE, and inside we managed to find a copy of Saif al-Islam's doctoral dissertation, which he submitted in 2008, more than 400 pages long. It's entitled "The Role of Civil Society in the Democratization of Global Governance Institutions." Let me just show you a highlight or two. He talks about the problems of citizens who live in undemocratic states where governments are authoritarian, abusive, and unrepresentative of their people's real interests. This man has tracked Saif's financial dealings, in particular his role in setting up a fund called the Libyan Investment Authority.
It's now worth about $150 billion, and vast numbers of financial institutions from London and around the world have been trooping to its doors, trying to get a piece of that action. And one of the ways in which they have been doing that is trying to make contact with Saif al-Islam or his friends, because they believe that he is one of the gatekeepers for that fund.
At the LSE, the students are upset about the ties between their university and the son of a dictator. But there are many others now wondering if it was such a good idea to do business with Saif al-Islam. Barnaby Phillips, Al Jazeera, London.
Well, there are fears that hundreds of thousands of refugees will try to cross the Mediterranean by boat, fleeing the violence in Libya. And at a meeting in Rome today of EU interior ministers, Italy called for help from its partners. Here's Harry Smith.
Once again, they demonstrate outside the Libyan embassy in Rome. These are Libyan expatriates forced out of their country by Colonel Gaddafi. Their message is clear. They will stay here until Gaddafi himself is forced to go.
The wall of fear is fallen. The spring of youth has begun in the Arab world.
Across the city, the interior ministers of 6 European countries with Mediterranean borders meet to work out how to deal with an influx of refugees fleeing the turmoil in North Africa. It's a problem the Italians are all too aware of. They've already had to cope with thousands of Tunisians trying to escape from the chaos that has gripped that country. The United Nations is also gearing up for another flood of refugees.
It is a treacherous journey, of course, and it is a treacherous journey also because the type of boats that people have been known to be using in the past are small dinghies, little boats that are not really very seaworthy. And we know that many, thousands of people have drowned in the Mediterranean.
Across Europe, leaders have been reacting to events, some calling for sanctions against Libya.
There has been conversations in the UN and in the UN Security Council, and there was a presidential statement last night that said just how unacceptable this was, and that all countries should condemn this sort of violence. Would I like us to go further and have a full United Nations Security Council resolution? Yes, I would.
I think for us the fundamental thing is to say no to violence, but we also need to be careful with regards to what will happen. We, along with other countries, have had relations with these people in power, which we're interested in for many reasons, and that they supply energy.
But this is not just a crisis which affects those European countries which have a border onto the Mediterranean. It goes much further than that, which is why this meeting in Rome will be followed up on Thursday by a meeting with ministers from all 27 European countries. They're agreed on only 2 things. It's a very unpredictable situation, but they desperately need a coordinated approach. Harry Smith, Al Jazeera, Rome.
Dr. Sami Hirmez is a visiting fellow at St. Anthony's College, that's in Oxford, and his research has included the anthropology of violence, and he's worked for various organizations, including Human Rights Watch and the United Nations Development Programme as well. And he joins us now live from London. Thank you for talking to Al Jazeera. I'd like to bring to your attention first an interview that one of Muammar Gaddafi's sons gave to the FT, Saadi Gaddafi, where he said that his father, Gaddafi, will play a major role in any regime formed in the country, but new blood will need to take over direct control and introduce reform. What do you think he means? What's he alluding to? Is he saying that his father plans to stay on?
I mean, I think the regime is in its last days, so they're going to try anything that they can do to hold on to this kind of power. So you're going to hear his son come out with some kind of report that you've just mentioned. He put his other son, Saif al-Islam, a few days ago to speak, and sort of these are certain tactics that a dictatorship will resort to in the last moments of its rule. So I don't, I wouldn't give so much emphasis to such reports. I think the voice of the people has spoken. I think that's where we have to look.
Is there enough momentum at this point, people power, to persuade Gaddafi that it's time to go?
I think so. I think what you're seeing in Libya is very similar to what you've seen in Egypt and in Tunisia, which is a wide sector of the population taking to the streets. It's not like the 80s. It's not just an Islamic group that's taking to the streets. It's not some fringe group of radicals that are taking to the streets. This is the entire population of various classes and tribes, in the case of Libya, that have taken to the streets. And I think and it's not just in one city. So I think that a wide array of protests is sure to put pressure on him, and his diplomats are also have started to resign. So I think that's another indication.
Yeah, the resignations of his diplomats that we've been seeing. But you mentioned Egypt and Tunisia, but what we saw happen in Egypt and Tunisia is that the army really played a factor in how those revolutions turned out. What's the likelihood that that happens in Libya? Because the army in Libya is very different to that of Egypt.
Yeah, I think you definitely have a good point there. The Libyan situation, it looks like, I mean, indeed, as we see, is going to be bloodier, and unfortunately, and I think in the end there will have to be some more defections from the army, and I think just watching Jazeera earlier today, they had someone on Jazeera Arabic, Brahim Jibril, who was talking about how the people need to accept the mercenaries into their fold, because the mercenaries are being given a choice, either kill or be killed. And I think as these cities fall, Benghazi has fallen, and as they can try to accept these mercenaries and protect them, that would be one way of turning the tide. But I think in Libya, it's not just the army, it's the security services that need to be somehow won over. And I really think the Libyan case